Thank you for joining this episode of Real Talk, Real Trust. I'm your host, Ryan Bikini. I am joined by Jason and Freddy, our Chief Experience Officer, one of our co-founders, and our Head of Product, Freddy. The topic for today is Content Strategy Optimized for GEO. And the episode is, believe it or not, number 14 of Real Talk, Real Trust. And the promise of this webinar series is that we cut through the clutter and we focus on topics that help you build trust with your consumers and your partners and your ecosystem, because at the end of the day, that's what tends to drive revenue. That's what drives loyal customers. And so how do you build trust in an environment where there's so much noise and so much activity? So that's what we're doing here today. And this episode number 14 is titled for GEO. Wow, strengthening your brand. I couldn't think of a better person to be on than Jason, who has built the dotCMS brand from the ground up, and Freddy, who's helped engineer the brand and what he's created over many, many years during their time at dotCMS. I won't collectively tell you how long they've been at dotCMS. It will age them a little bit more than that it's fair to do. But with that, Jay, do you want to give a quick intro about who you are and your role at dotCMS, and we'll pass it over to Freddy.
Yeah, so my name is Jason Smith. am the co-founder of dotCMS, along with Willie Zell. And currently, though, like any co-founder, I've worn a lot of hats over the years. Right now, I'm currently wearing the Chief Experience Officer hat, working with customer success. Strategically, Will is actually involved in sales, so we kind of bracketed the whole products. Will gets to see what clients are asking for in the future or in the sales process. I get to hear what clients are complaining about or asking for now. And then we get to push all of that to Freddy to make dotCMS better.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us, Jason. Freddy, over to you, a quick intro about you and your role at dotCMS.
Of course. So I'm Freddy Montes. I'm VP of Product at dotCMS. My job is basically figuring out what are we going to build next and why. So right now, that means make sure that our CMS helps brands to stay visible in this new world. That AI is maybe your new search engine. I guess we'll figure it out today.
Yeah, Freddy, thanks. It's the question I think that many marketers, including our head of marketing and other marketers that we talk to, are wrestling with, which this idea of how do we build content, because that's the conduit to build connection with our customers in a digital first world that AI wants to cite while maintaining our brand voice, not diluting our brand. So before we get into the meat of that discussion, it's customary to make sure that you guys squirm a little bit. We get a chance to know you, would put you on the hot seat, because you both have a lot of polish in your delivery. So I want people to see the human side of you, have a little fun. But Jay, I'll kick it to you first. What AI tool can you not live without?
The three main ones I use right now are ChatGPT for content generation and kind of my assistant writer, Claude for anything I want to build, Google Studio for any prototyping I want to do, and then Notebook LLM for generating any materials or learning materials or videos. And that's just this week. Ask me next week, that'll change.
Absolutely. How about you, Freddy?
Cloud Code. I do everything that Jason just said with Cloud Code.
Boring.
Cloud Code worked for me. So we'll, but you're right, Jay. It could change within a week. The
by the end of this call, it could change.
Speed at the models are shit thing. We talked just a little bit about AI, but just a fun question for our listeners. Who is the most underrated athlete or band, in your opinion?
You go first, Freddy.
I'm going first. For me, athlete, Demetrius Johnson, Mighty Mouse from the UFC and One Fighting Company. I think he's the best fighter alive, to be honest. And people don't get enough credit to that guy.
Love it. How about you, Jay?
You go with bands. Chances are, if I know an athlete, they're probably well respected. I'm not huge into following professional sports. Bands, I'm going to have to go with the Pixies.
Interesting.
Yeah. They have a huge album of songs, and I feel like they're only known for Where's My Mind. But their other songs are amazing. The Pixies.
In addition to some AI and GEO insights, Jay has given us some musical insights for our listeners to dig into. I will offer mine unsolicited, a band from my childhood, without any explanation, which is Incubus. So if you haven't heard of Incubus, put them on your list. It's multiple albums that can be straight through. Okay, enough with putting you both on the hot seat. Let's get into the matter at hand. Let's talk about GEO, specifically what's changing. And maybe, Jay, as someone who's led our marketing, who's built our brand, maybe you can talk about how GEO is impacting how brands are discovered, evaluated, selected. What is important for our listeners to know?
Everyone is using AI, and I don't think they realize they are. Generative search results are changing what we used to call the verb Googling. I'm going to Google that. And you used to put search terms in like, best CD player or, keywords you're targeting in your search query. Now, just talking to people in public, they're putting in questions, like full-blown questions that they used to almost be told not to do in the old days in search. Like, no, that's not how you do search. You gotta, what keywords are you looking for? And marketing agencies would target, or marketing departments would target those keywords, whether it was keyword stuffing or whatever. They were very focused on the word themselves, where now, whether people realize it or not, just looking at our Google Search Console, I mean, people are putting in long questions, trying to get answers, and they're almost self-identifying to Google as like, answer this question for me. Don't send me to a search. Don't give me a web page. Give me an answer. And I think that's only going to get, well, it's obviously going to get more and more prominent in the way people use Google.
Yeah.
I think there's still a disconnect that people don't realize that when they go to Google, they're going to an AI. I think people talking about it as two different things, and it's like, no, that search result answer at the top is being generated with AI.
Yeah. Jay, it's a great point. I think as we've looked at it internally in our marketing team, it's this idea. It used to be a multi-step journey potentially to discover and understand a brand, right? You searched, you went to a website, you looked at content, you evaluated, maybe went to reviews, but the power of the answer engines, and you said it's a subtlety that's changing right in front of our eyes with Google, is that more and more of that experience is happening in the first step, right? There's not this longer sequence. So I think that's a really good point that our listeners should be mindful of is, yes, you need to have the right content, but you might have a shorter window to essentially convince a buyer because they can get more context quicker. Just a level set too for our listeners, Jay, many people are familiar with SEO. This term GEO has become more and more prevalent. Can you just sort of break down the difference and the similarities between GEO and SEO so our listeners have a sense of nuances there are that they should be mindful of?
Yeah, and I think it's more the change in how Google and other search engines, and now people aren't even using search engines. They're going directly to their AI desktop agent or whatever and putting in search queries. So SEO is the idea of optimizing your website, through markup schema or setting up your web page with the, correct metadata, organizing in a way where you have an H1 at the top of the page, and then you have cascading header styles, making sure your site was findable by search engines and indexed. But again, that was all really focused on keywords or collection of keywords. Or it's funny, I remember long tail keywords, it was like 3 words. Now long tail keywords is like 3 sentences.
Yeah.
That you can target. It's funny, I think of like SEO as kind of the dark ages where we were trying to trick Google into doing something, where I think in GEO, there's an intelligence behind it. And it's not just counting the number of times a keyword was mentioned or how many websites link back to you. It understands the context in which your content resides, what other people think of your content. I think when SEO used to be where it builds indexes of pages and stuff, and you have this big index and Google is searching its own index of content to try and figure out the best search results. AI is actually going out there and spidering from your web page, following links. You link to Gartner. Well, what is Gartner saying about you? And they're building this whole context window of what is your website about? What is your products about? And how is that relevant to whatever my user just asked for, and trying to give the best results. Not to say that Google wasn't always trying to give the best results. I feel like AI now it wants to satisfy the user. It wants to provide informed questions, and it's almost embarrassed, not that it has emotions, but it doesn't like giving bad or hallucinated responses or inaccurate responses. If you've ever corrected an AI, it actually gets very apologetic, like, oh, shoot. So anyway, those are the big differences to me. I think it's just a progression.
Yeah.
And that there's just much more of an intelligence behind it rather than just a single snapshot of this page has X amount of keywords and 10 reputable websites link back to it.
Yeah, that evolution there's new terminology and sort of some new concepts that are in there that you've mentioned as well. Like this idea of a context window, right? And the idea that, hey, it's not just pulling based on, how the web has been indexed and retrieving results, but giving context around what's being rendered and within a certain sort of view. So there's some new ideas in there, but so it can feel overwhelming, I think, for some of our listeners. What are the first steps to make sure that you're building your content strategy and you're structuring your content that these LLMs are going to start to pick up and take notice of, so you continue to have visibility? So what are the first steps a branch do to make sure that they're on the right track there?
First step is definitely do a content audit. Make sure the content you have live and accessible on your website is accurate and up to date. Once an LLM has bad information in there, it's much more challenging to try and correct its assumptions than it is to educate it in the first place. So if your website has old product descriptions, products that you don't offer anymore, really try to clean all that up. Make sure all your pages are in your brand's voice. Yeah, I would start with a content audit. And then from there, you'll identify that your content gaps. What are you missing? What needs to be expanded on, and what needs to be removed?
Jay, that is great feedback, and even another great nuance that you gave here, which is it's more difficult to correct a model than to have it set up right the first time. And so there is urgency around that content audit, as well as urgency around making sure that you start to fill the gaps in your content strategy. So super helpful there. Freddy, as you think about once you've taken the step to do a content audit, and now you need to operationalize how you're going to deploy content more efficiently, right? So you're visible in these models. What are some of the operational changes that organizations need to think through, whether it's how they utilize workflows, how they utilize their publishing architecture, whatever it might be? What are the operational changes to be prepared for GEO?
Yeah, well, normally you used to review your content from a point of view of, does it meet the requirements that we set for ourselves or we set for humans? And that was kind of like the baseline. But now that you got to meet extra requirements for models, your audits have to be more, you got to have more scrutinium on it, right? So you got to make sure that you have stuff like, you have signals for the model, right? It's stuff like, your content needs to be audited. Like, it needs to sound like it has authoritative on it. It needs to be a structure. It's not only about semantic structure. Like, remember, like Jason mentioned, like we have an H1 here and we got bullet point. It has to be structured in a way that it tells the story, right? It has to be dense with facts. It used to be dense on keywords. Now we got to shift a little bit the mindset and talk about facts. When I was doing research for this episode, one of the things that the LLM take into account a lot, if you have numbers, like if you said, X amount of percentage is set X, Y, and Z, because those are facts that the model can be trained on. And then it can be used that to cite your content. So your operation shift because you got to be more rigorous on it, right? That's where automation comes into place, and actually using other models and other agentic system in order to make those sort of auditing. It will help you a lot and will take you a long way.
Yeah. On that, I want to dig into some of the specifics around how you create content that has facts, has context, that has a storyline. But I do want to, before we get to that, how do you think about protecting against AI slop as a part of operation of creating content? So this idea of, if you are creating content that does have facts, it does have a narrative, but it still is very kind of has an AI tone that's not locked in. There's a risk of, people looking at your site or looking at your experience saying, oh, this feels very AI. It's missing the human element in what's being created. So before we get to the specifics of how your content should be built to get reference in models, how do you protect against slop? Either way, you guys want to cover that?
So what you're asking is, when you're using AI to generate content, how do you protect yourself from that content to be AI slop?
Yep, exactly.
Normally, what I think that it is actually kind of happening. So a lot of the first use of AI generation of anything right after text, it was around software development and code, right?
Yeah.
So there was this explosion like Cursor and Cloud Code and VS Code, Copilot, all those sort of things, right? And in code, you have to protect even more in this kind of situations, right? Because sometimes in code, it could be even more dangerous. It could break your app. It could, make you lose money really, really quick. It could break your build, whatever, right? So what it happened in that area, I think is going to mimic what is going to happen or is actually happened in content generation. So for example, in software development, we have a specific set of files that set rules for the generation of code, right? So it said you can set rules around it. You can do proper governance. For example, there is a typical file in all these agentic systems that is called agents.nd, in which basically you point it into a specific direction, right? You point the agent to look into specific directions in your code in order to generate new code. So what you're saying is, and it works better, instead of you trying to set the agent, don't use X or Y voice or X or Y word or X or Y tone. What you do is you generate your content, you validate it, and then you point the agent into that content that you previously know for a fact that is good, and you tell it, use this as a guideline. My brand voice is right there. So I think that's easily translated into the content generation agentic system. And you always improving your system by making content even better and better.
Yeah. If I play that back, and Jay, I want you to weigh in here too. You essentially create the foundational content. It's human-led, right? And you can create the brand guidelines and voice, right? That's human-led as well. And then you can use an agent to ensure that the proper guardrails are put in place.
Correct.
So
and normally what you do is you use a multi-agent system, and that works really, really well. So you use an agent that generates the content, and you use another agent that acts as a guardian to review that content and set back to the agent, this doesn't work because you're saying X, Y, or Z, and you should be saying X, Y, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you can create a specialized content that are guardian on specific situations. For example, if you are HIPAA compliance, you can create an agent that is expert on HIPAA, and then you can point it into that content and make sure that it doesn't do that. So if you create a specific agent for specific areas of your content, it's going to work better than instead of trying to create one generic agent that is going to try to kind of solve all your brand voice situations. You can make, instead of one agent to rule all your brand, you can create multiple agents based on your brand. And then you can have an army of agents looking at your content and basically giving you suggestions.
Well, Freddy,
that's how we do it in code.
I love that, because if you equate that to AI doing, essentially enhancing the work that we do, if you think about it in the real world, and I think of a customer of ours who's planning to launch 700 websites, right? And they have multiple people. It's in a compliance-led industry. It's government. They have the person who's responsible for the voice of this
Correct.
particular organization and what it should sound like and how it should feel and how they should relate to citizens. They have someone who's responsible for compliance and accessibility. And so those different stakeholders have different views on the content and how it should be structured and how it should be displayed to citizens. And so I love this idea of creating different agents to remove AI slop or to fill in some of the gaps, and this idea of specific agents, not necessarily one that rules all. But Jay, I want to give you the floor because I know that it looks like you wanted to chime in. Any other thoughts on how you mitigate AI slop to protect the brand?
I do a little bit, but Freddy is spot on. The idea of building agents, think of it as a creative writing team, and you build an agent to do the origination, you do an agent to brand test it, you build an agent to quality assure it. Yeah, have each agent have a specific role and task, and then refine that agent, or have that agent refine itself until you'll get better and better at it as you do it more and more often. But one thing I would definitely say is do not be afraid of using AI to generate content. AI, as far as GEO, does not care whether the content was created with an AI agent or not. Whether it can tell or not, I don't know. Whether it cares, it does not.
Yeah.
What's most valuable to AI is that information accurate? Is it comprehensive? Does it have authority? Can AI prove that it is authoritative? Can it go to other websites or follow the links that you have within your story or blog that is citing other resources? Is that data citable? Can you link to a research paper that says that data is accurate? That is what AI is looking for. Whether it was written or generated by AI, doesn't really care, or I don't think it cares. So use AI to create stuff. Don't be afraid of it. Just make sure you give it the outline of what you want written. It takes a lot of time to write a great prompt that's going to generate a great story or a blog.
Yeah.
You really need to give it the assignment. And I've always thought internally about this as like, I'm creating a writing assignment and I'm telling this person, like I would one of my employees, exactly what I want done, as much detail as I can possibly find, and then have it go out and write it and then iterate over it with it. Yeah. And like Freddie said, having agents setting up specific agents to do different things is, how you really do put the guardrails on.
Yeah, Jay, I want to talk about guardrails there. I was going to bring it up later, but I think you brought it to us to a great place. Just this idea of still, I think of some of the customers I've talked to that are banks, that are healthcare companies, and, that have large scale deployments, 50, 100 websites, whatever it may be. The idea still of you guiding and giving a clear description about what needs to be created, and then having agents to oversee it, right, in some capacity. Even though you have both of those steps, there still will be some trepidation, right, because of the risk in deploying content. Can you talk about, maybe, Freddie, you as well, the importance of workflows, permissions, audit trails, and how we've thought about that as dotCMS, and maybe even their importance, if it's changed since, the evolution of AI? Either one of you guys want to take that?
I can take it. What I've been working on for a while is we realized really, really quick when we start getting into AI content generation that governance, workflows, auditing, rollback, and like keep the user, keep the human under control, it was the most important thing for ICP. So that was not optional. Like it wasn't like you're producing, a personal blog posts. We're talking here about multi-million companies that are producing content that are compliance for their users, even if we're healthcare or governance or finance, whatever, right? So there is a lot of legislation around it that they need to be protected, right? But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't not use AI and have, a regular team, what I'm calling a regular team. They actually needs to be able to use AI, but with guardrails, right? So that's why I feel like we are building in the right direction, because we have workflows and you can control each step of the way of how your content gets from draft to a live website, or you can control that to the most granular way. We're injecting some AI functionality within those workflows. All those workflows has been by nature auditables, rollbackables, and you can assign people to it, right? So now what we're doing, it used to be only humans in that content lifecycle. Now, in some of those pieces of that content lifecycle, there's going to be injected agents, AI agents, or AI workflows, right? But then the last piece of the puzzle, right? The last person or the last entity that pushed the button is going to be a human, at least for now, right? I feel that when the models start getting better and better, and depending on the type of content that you're trying to post, you'll be able to let the system to be automatically being published this kind of content, right? Yeah. But as long as you have full visibility and full traceability of this content life cycle, and you can see how your agents have interacted with it, then that's what we're building towards. And there is another piece of this, right? You can build agents in a way that you can set ground rules on when they can call you. Maybe an agent can have all the context in a way that it can perform the task or the task completely by itself. But maybe if the agent has to perform, 6 tasks, and then in task number 3, he has some questions, he can stop and call you, right? Assign something to you, a question or a task, and then you can go and answer, and then the agent can continue. That's already happening in software development. Like right now, as we speak, that's going to happen in content, like literally very, very soon.
Yeah. Freddie, I love that, because it's the workflows you're talking about, maybe it's a multi-stage approval process, or maybe it's a review that has to go through brand guidelines and has multiple people who weigh in on it. Those workflows, content gets stuck, or it gets, and so how do you optimize that with an agent being able to move it along, as well as to come back to the people who need to weigh in when they need to weigh in? It's pretty powerful.
The other
Go
piece that changed
Yeah.
is when you talk about weighing in, it used to be like you're going in and actually changing the content. Now your weighing in is probably going to look more like instructions. Like, hey, no, you shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. And then the other piece of that puzzle is like once you correct something, you can ask the agent to remember that so it doesn't happen again. So there can be a memory system around your content where you correct something, that's going to be there, and that's going to be part of your next iteration,
Yep.
right?
Yep. You won't need to recorrect a color that was deployed on a page, or that was in draft mode for a page, right? That's or or language that was off brand. All that stuff can be built into the memory of the agent. Yep.
Exactly, because you're working with the system, improving the system, and that creates your content, and not necessarily creating the content you're directly.
Yep. That's great. Jay, anything else you want to add here?
No, it's interesting. When Freddy was talking about agents earlier, I really envision a world where agents become steps of the workflow. And within your content management system, you would have set off the entire workflow chain with some sort of prompt to generate something. I know it's very easy to focus on blogs, but this could be product descriptions. It could be anything. Adding a new product. You give it a prompt, you give it some photos, and the AI workflow goes from agent to agent to agent. And your agent that checks and preps all the images has different instructions than the agents that's writing the SEO descriptions and metadata and everything and keywords versus, the marketing copy that comes out of that. So I picture it working, and like Freddy was saying, a workflow that then one of those agents along that workflow needs additional information can go ahead and prompt back to the user within the system. And you get a workflow action that says, hey, I'm stuck here. Help me out or whatever. And you give it instructions to say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, or, to get unstuck.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that idea of having an assistant as you try to move through a workflow to not get a content, have a delay in getting produced, and being able to navigate that much more efficiently is hugely valuable. I was going to ask, as we're talking about the content workflow, and we get closer to the delivery, which you're kind of alluding to there, Jay, like what are some of the details around how you produce content to ensure it's visible? You talked a little bit about it earlier, facts. You talked about the importance of uh, the importance of length by context. You talked about the importance of storytelling. Are there other things that you guys want to hone in on that as you're thinking about the end product of your content to ensure that it's visible to LLMs?
Yeah. So what my gut, my feeling, and again, this is all just so new, and anyone who tells you they know the answer is lying or lying to
It's still
themselves.
the Wild West.
Yeah. When I write blogs, I really try to focus on it being authoritative. Is it quoting legitimate resources? Does it have data backing it up? AIs love data, like Freddy was saying, charts, graphs. In one blog, I mean, whether you're using Notebook or anything else, you can generate videos at it from that blog. I mean, provide the element as much rich content and authoritative backlinking or linking out little things. I know a lot of people now are using awards you've received. That's just real world people verified data, data points. dotCMS is the best open source Java CMS. Here's 28 awards that say that.
Yep.
That means something to the language model. Like they're like, oh, look, they've actually won awards. I can verify it because I can go to their websites and see that they've won these awards. They're quoting, something from Gardner or any of the other analysts. I mean, that's what I really focus on. It's funny. I think we're going to be moving to an agent to agent world where, an agent's going to come to our website or to a dotCMS website, and it's going to have a whole list of questions, especially in like the B2B world.
Yep.
In our ICP,
Yep.
it's going to be like the agent's going to get sent out to the web to be like, I need these 25 questions answered, doing X, Y, and Z, and writing content that can help answer that. It's almost like agents are going to come to your website with little mini RFPs, for instance.
Yep.
Where it's like, I need to make a list of the top 5 CMSs for multi-site content management. And it's going to go back and it's going to generate a list, and making sure that you're answering those questions and backing it up with, backlinks, awards, things that are checkable and verifiable, that you're making statements that the language model can prove or validate. people always concern themselves with length and stuff and how long should a blog be or this be. There's a lot of research that shows anywhere from 1,500 to 1,700 words is the optimal length for a blog, which seems like a fairly long form blog. To me, more important than the length of it, I think what ends up happening is that's the length in which you can really make a strong argument for whatever you're trying to say.
Yeah. I was
It's
thinking the
not
same
the
thing,
fact that
Jay. I was thinking the
it's not
same.
the fact that it's that long. It's that's really what it takes to make an informed,
Well-rounded contextual
Well-rounded,
argument that also has references that show that
Exactly.
It's not the characters, it's the content.
Yep. And it's the elements of that content that it takes that length in order to provide something that's meaningful to the LLMs. I did want to ask this idea. You hear about vector ready and the importance of a vector repository for LLMs. Can you talk about how modern CMS serves as a vector ready repository and why that matters?
We have been talking a lot about the length of the content, the data, like how the content should be structured in the content itself.
Yep.
But a structured content is still very, very important. So a structured content is not going away, right? And a vector-ready CMS basically means that your content is structured in a way that AI can consume it, can index it, can cite it without have to reverse engineering. So that's when you have content types, fields, structured fields, or you have rich metadata, or you have schema markups, and they have to be organized in the convenience of being consumed, right? And that's what makes your content legible, basically, to an LLM. So schema.org, right? Is that's like a huge JSON object that basically is markup that you embed in your web page and describe your content in a language that is structured that Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, whoever can already speak. Like they're really good at reading code. And they are really good at inferring what that code is trying to do. In our case, it's basically explaining what this page is about or do, or you name it, right? So that's the way that you don't let the model to guess, because it already kind of knows the content and the context, but structured it, right? So that whole thing started it's basically how you get your content from a piece of text to a vector database, which is, a bunch of numbers that is pointing in different directions in your content. And that's how, when you do a search, like when you go to dotCMS, dotCMS.com, when you go to other places and you search, the response that you're seeing, it could be built from multiple pieces of content because it was vectorized. It's known as RAG, right? And basically it's turning your unstructured content in a structured way that AI can just look for it and search it and find the right words.
Yeah, and that's pretty correct. As someone who's not an engineer, the concept there is that the LLM is making a series of decisions to give you an output, and the vector database is essentially what allows the LLM to pick and choose what pieces to render the right answer. So that bit of a shift in terms of how the LLMs are going to render the content and making it
more than
accessible.
render, how they reach it to
how they reach it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that context. And if our listeners have specific questions about that, you can obviously reach out to us. I just did a quick time check and realized how long we've been. So I did want to change gears a little bit and ask just two more questions. Freddy and Jay, as you think about measuring success and some of the customers that you've worked with and how you think about it internally at dotCMS, what are the leading indicators that you're evolving your content strategy and approach that it's working? Right, Jay? Like, how do you think about it? Is it mentions within the LLMs? Is it overall engagement with our content? Like, what are the signs that how you're evolving your content strategy is working or not?
Wow, great question. I think the important thing is not to get focused in on one signal. It's very easy to gamify your process, and lots of people fall into this trap. Like, you give them a KPI, like this is your KPI, this is what you need to focus on, and then you gamify the process in order to meet that KPI. I think doing an evaluation of where you rank now, whether there's all these new tools emerging every day as far as being able to track mentions or citations or whatever in the GEO space, just figure out where you are now. Probably identify 5 or 6 metrics or key points you want to track, and then experiment. Again, start with a site audit, find out, make sure you clean up everything that's you don't want indexed. Just good general hygiene there. The next thing I would do is go to Google Search Console. There's just Google this, but if you go to the search query results, you can put a regex expression in that would say, for me, every search results I've shown up for that is more than 5 words. So you're really focusing on people that are targeting AI answers and find out what's working for you already. Go through and identify 10 long, multi-word keyword searches that you really want to rank for. Drop those into, an AI and say, give me 10 blog titles or concepts or whatever ideas, and start building a list, and then keep tracking it. See, do those citations go up? Do they go down? Are you still the same?
Yep.
You've really got to get out there and just start trying stuff. I wouldn't say throw a ton of slop out there. Be specific in what you want to do, and be honest to your brand and what you're doing. But yeah, I would start there and try not to focus in on one signal, because you're going to gamify yourself into, over optimizing for one thing that may or may not work in the long run.
Yeah, Jay, I love the idea of, whenever there's a trend, people tend to go all in and say it is the silver bullet to build a brand or to drive leads or whatever it might be. But I like the holistic approach, knowing that, there are some people who still haven't adjusted in how they discover brands. They might still be using traditional search, even if Google is pushing them towards an AI, an answer. And then this idea of, hey, it almost felt like the evolution of keywords in terms of looking at, this idea of longer form searches, and if there's volume associated with them, because someone is then looking for an answer. And that gives you some insight in terms of what content you should be producing, which you then said, hey, use AI to generate articles around that. So I see some big shifts, and I also see some tweaks that can be done in order to measure the effectiveness of the content. So I do know that we're at about time. And so you guys have been very generous with spending time with us for today. Both very, very busy here at dotCMS, but I did want to see if you had any parting words of advice, like for our listeners, just conceptually that on what we've talked about today, that you want them to take away around, how they maintain their brand while still optimizing for GEO. So if there's one or two takeaways that you might want to share, Freddy, I'll go to you first, and then I'll come back to you, Jay.
I will go with structured content. Like if your pages don't have schema.org, if your pages don't have really good structure on that end, I will start there as well. That will get you, like, once you start putting that together, you will realize if there is something that is missing, or the other way around, that you might don't want in your content in the first place. The other piece is like traffic. Like most of us pay attention to traffic, right? Top of the funnel. We want to know how many people is reaching. I think that now we need to start looking more into conversion rates, right? Because maybe we get less traffic, but we get higher conversions.
Yep.
Right.
100%.
And that's kind of the metric that I will aim for. And what last thing that I will do is look, when you're getting visitors, are they arriving with more product specific knowledge? Like they already got answers from the AI based on your content. So they potentially could be arriving to your sales pipeline more informed. I know that's hard to measure, don't get me wrong. But if you start seeing a little bit of those signals, maybe they're getting those answers from the model, from the LLMs.
It's a great thing to be looking forward towards, because we are seeing that trend, and that impacts everything from what content you create to how you look at the analytics on that content and filling the gap. So Freddy, some great thoughts there. Jay, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. Take a breath, put a plan together, and just get started. Get a baseline, find out where you are today, put a plan that meets your needs and your time together. It's an evolution. You're not that far behind. This has all come on very quick. I do believe that there is first mover advantage. Like if you can get cited by an LLM earlier, it gives you the advantage. I know in SEO that was the same way. Like if you could get ranked number one, there's a bias to keep you higher ranked from the systems than to keep moving you off. I think LLMs are experiencing the same thing. There's first mover bias there. So get started. Set up an awards page on your website of all the awards your company has won. Cite them in articles, cite reputable resources. Yeah, just get started.
Yeah.
And like Freddie was saying, put a plan together for the way you structure your content. Not only the technical SEO aspects of it, like heading ones, heading twos, schema.org data structure, but also knowing that a lot of these long form blog posts and stories and pages are going to be optimized for the AIs, but also give 2 or 3 paragraphs in the beginning that helps the rest of us who don't want to read for 20 minutes. An understanding of what the article is about to, make the decision of whether they want to dive in deeper. So bullet points up front, too long, don't read type information up front would be helpful too.
Jay, some great conceptual as well as thoughts as well as details on how to get started and some of the things that our listeners can do. But Freddie, Jay, really appreciate both of your time. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. There will be a recording on YouTube and Spotify, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Real Talk, Real Trust. Thanks, everyone.